Starting. All right, we are officially live. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give it another 2 minutes here. 60 seconds-ish. And we'll let people filter in. But thanks for being here. By way of quick introduction, I'm Abhinav Kapoor, co-founder and CEO of Vicky. We're a customer data platform for restaurants. Joining me is Evan Pardue, Director of Brand and CX. Did I get it right? Director of Brand.
Yeah, that's right.
So I just got to make sure I get the title right. Director of Brand and CX at Condado Tacos, and of course, Jan Stewart, VP of Food Operations, also at Condado Tacos. We'll give it another 30 seconds here. Let people filter in. Now, we already did this before. Everybody hopped on. We went live. But Evan or Jan, one of you has to give the story on the background now, on the virtual backgrounds that you guys have.
That's you, Evan.
There you go. Evan's the brand guy, so it's got to be Evan. Yeah.
I'll go for it. Yeah. So Condado, we are known for being really involved with the arts and more specifically the communities that we are in and supporting local artists there. So every wall in our restaurants hand painted by local artists, and we have a team of Condado artists too that we work with. Each one is unique. They are hand painted. They are colorful. They are sometimes a visual adventure. Each wall tells a different story. And so it really creates a very unique environment to bring your friends. Kids, will spend their whole time at Condado just staring at the walls, which is very nice.
I love it. It's better than that than a screen. So there you go.
Yes.
Having two little kids myself, I know. Trust me. Well, excellent. With that amazing context, we'll get it going here. Evan, Jan, thank you so much for joining us. For all of you who are watching live or watching the stream, thank you for spending a little bit of your time here. Again, I'm Abhinav Kapoor, co-founder and CEO of Vicky, and welcome to Tacos, Tequila, and Tariffs. The alliteration ran deep when we were brainstorming this one, but this session is all about how Condado Tacos takes all of the different supply chain challenges. I won't just say from the tariffs most recently, but I think it's a pleasure to have Jan here as well to really talk about how their supply chain has evolved really pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and why tariffs, I think, Jan, we talked about, tariffs are sort of just the latest iteration where you guys can flex a muscle that you've already built over the last few years. And of course, having Evan here gives us the opportunity to really dive into how folks on the supply chain side, I think, for context, Condado is probably one of the most innovative brands that we've worked with, specifically when it comes to LTOs, menu innovation, value, really thinking holistically about the place of every item, whether it's a main, whether it's a side, whether it's a beverage, how that fits on the menu, and what it means to the guest when they're looking at the menu. And so just very fortunate to have both of you here. And with that, Evan, why don't we start with you, since you are on the brand side and sort of the keeper of the flame on the brand side. Just give us your background, how long you've been in Condado's, and then maybe walk us through Condado's value prop or brand principles, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us. We are big fans of Vicky, power users, we would like to say. And Condado is very special. I've been with the brand for going on 3 years. And really what makes us unique, we are a fast growing company. We specialize in build your own tacos, known for bold flavors, fresh ingredients, made from scratch in a really energetic and welcoming, inclusive environment and atmosphere. You can see in our backgrounds, we want everybody to feel surrounded by a standout experience. And that's not just the art on the walls. That is fantastic service. We are a casual dining brand. We have a full bar. You'll have a server that is going to be amazing. That's going to guide you through the whole process. And we also have a really powerful off-prem business too that has expanded a lot since the pandemic, which we could dive into. But ultimately, we really stand for quality, for value, and for experience. And focus on how to make guests feel that they belong and that they have a place here at Condado.
Yeah, I love that. And then when you think about value and experience, can you talk again, like at a high level? I know we're going to dive a lot into the menu side of things, but maybe at a high level, when you think about value and what it means to you, that's obviously probably the biggest term in the restaurant industry over the last, 24 months, let's call it. What does value mean for Condado, and how does Condado at a high level convey that value to the guest?
Yeah, I think it's seeing experience. We talk brands talk a lot about experience, but it's really experience 360. It
Mm,
is the experience of the service. It is the quality of the environment. It is the quality of the food, and ultimately the value of what they get for the total amount of the check. Our guests have experienced inflation fatigue. There, no doubt about that. Guests are watching how they're spending, but that does not mean that they want to have a lower quality item or a bad experience. In fact, they
yeah.
actually want a more personalized experience. They want a unique and differentiated time when they're going out. They don't want it to just be the same old thing. And so, Condado, I think we're really uniquely positioned in this moment to really meet guests where they are today, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that's great. And this is something that I've been harping on probably over the last, couple months, but I go back to what an operator we work with told me last year, where it's like price is sort of, when it comes to value, price is obviously the easiest thing to look at. It's the one thing that we can all measure, of course, most easily. But when you think about value, it's so much more than price, right? It comes down to experience, as you said. It comes down to food. It comes down to quality. It comes down to cleanliness. It comes down to service,
Yeah.
hospitality, and then of course it's the price you pay for all of those things together. And so I think when
Yeah.
you think about inflation fatigue, I guess what does inflation fatigue mean as well? Is that inflation fatigue with Condado specifically? Is that inflation fatigue in the sense that things are just getting more expensive generally, and so guests are more discerning with how they spend their dollars? How do you think about that internally when you think of the concept of inflation and value?
Yeah, I think it's the latter that the guests are really, they are discerning in how they're spending their dollars. Whether that is, we have a really robust loyalty program. So for the guests
Mm,
that are signed up and are active in the loyalty program, they see a lot of value there, right? Because they're not only unlocking rewards as they order online, order in the app, or dine in. We also hear from those guests that they are being very conscious about, hey, when I go out, I really want great portions. I want great quality, right? They're really attaching it to that full 360 experience. They know that they're going to get what they really want, which really relates to our menu and its customization. So it's again, it's all of those pieces lining up together to really connect that whole experience to the total check.
yeah. And so if I think about touching on the core principles that you outlined earlier, it's value, and it's an experience and quality. Those seem like basically the three non-negotiables, for lack of a better term, for
Yeah,
for the brand overall. Is that right? Yeah. Excellent. And
100%.
excellent. Great. And when I think about the core differentiator, I know, of course, all of those three pieces together are the necessary ingredients for the formula of what makes Condados a success and what makes a great experience for a guest, or what makes a guest engagement with Condado successful. If we were to think about like the core differentiator for the brand, because I think this is the way holistically I think about the restaurant environment. It's like the rising tide lifted all boats for the last 2 to 3 years, where there were just more dollars. People were at home. The people are anchoring more on convenience. They're getting checks, from the government during the time pandemic, and now it's sort of like the easier money is sort of washing out, and of course, people are becoming way more discerning with their dollar, and almost because of that rising tide lifting all boats mentality, you just had a flood of competition and a flood of sameness in the market across different concepts or brands. I would say on the delivery apps and even within sort of like local markets. When you think about the biggest differentiator, let's say like the top one, maybe two differentiators, getting a little bit more specific around experience or value, what do you see as sort of like the reason a guest comes to Condado? Like hands down, is it the tacos plus the vibe? Is it the margaritas plus the service? I would love for you to sort of like distill it down in a nutshell for us here.
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think ultimately it is the customization that our
Right.
menu allows, the flexibility that as we had a great user group with loyalty guests, and one guest in Charlotte, she told me that her son is a super picky eater. She is not. She loves very spicy food. She has her favorite taco that she builds that is extra spicy, everything with a flame on it. Her son does not like really anything when they go out. So she brought him to Condado because we have a flexible menu. BYO is the heart of Condado.
Got it.
And
Yep.
he started with a flour shell with chicken and cheese. The next visit, he added one more ingredient, right? And that's really what I think sets us apart is, with price, with menu, with options, it's all about customization. Everybody who you bring can find something on the menu, whether it's ultra spicy, whether it's a clash of two things they want to see if they go together, whether it's a taco suggestion that we've built with unusual ingredients and combinations. Everybody at the table feels like they can have their own adventure on the menu without feeling left out. Everybody's welcome.
I love that. I think that's a great that's a great sort of like through line for like the brand identity. And then of course that nicely tees up Jan, I know not a lot of, around 50-ish unit brands have someone in your background, of your expertise in this role. And it feels like you got kind of a tall order here, because you need to basically source ingredients that enable this level of customization and enable the brand's differentiation, right? If I think of like you as the input, almost what Evan is doing on the other side is the output. And so can you just talk us through high level your background, how you got to Condado's? Let's start there. And then I would love to dive into sort of some of the unique supply chain challenges of fulfilling the promise that Evan's talking about here.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so Jan Stewart, Vice President of Food Operations, and I started with Condado almost at day one. One restaurant that Condado had right before we, started to really grow, and I was fortunate to be the executive kitchen manager. Started, in the back of the house, and from restaurant one, and then opening all the restaurants up to 7 or 8. And then as we started to grow and scale and build out our team and be able to, grow at a faster rate, a sustainable, way, my role started to change. And I started to get more into the supply chain side, logistics side, contracts and things like that. So it was really cool that, I could evolve into the role that I'm at, was still having, such close ties to the operations side. Of how we do things, how the food works, performs for us, the flavors that we're trying to achieve. And I oversee our chef as well, who navigates the menu along, work really, really closely with Joe Connor, founder and CIO, or Chief Innovative Officer. So we're all working really close, between marketing and the food and the innovation, and from the creator down to the chef. So pretty fortunate to be in a position. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. And let's, I guess, walk us through just like your role at the brand has evolved. I'm sure the supply chain has evolved as well. So I would love to understand, maybe we go back to 2020 and we do just a quick pre-post. What were things like pre-2019 from sourcing, from procurement, and then maybe we just walk us through that 2020 to 2022 period and what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were just in our baby growing stages at that time in 2019 into 20 into the pandemic. And we really started to skyrocket during the pandemic with our model. So the challenge for us was keeping up, really, which was very fortunate, for us in an environment that, was very challenging. From 2020, for a while, it was, the name of the game was, can you keep up, and then can you get the product, right?
Yeah.
Price wasn't exactly the issue at that point. Not until a few years later, when things started to come back online and the supply chain started to really kind of fall apart a few years after the pandemic, then you had the price challenge coming back, and inflation really, started to be a part of everybody's vocabulary. So navigating those different challenges, whether it was from a labor resource side in the beginning, to an availability, and then just to the price of inflation and things like that, there was some different challenges as it evolved. Last year, I would say maybe late 23 into 24, I think everybody started to feel a little bit of, okay, this is kind of a normal, we're in a new normal, right. Other vendors and partners are coming back online. People are starting to look for business out there. And people started to feel a little bit more confident, I think, with maybe not necessarily getting, a lot better pricing on things, but at least being able to predict or mitigate risk moving forward and get a little bit more security behind some of their strategy and their decisions. And then, going into this year and the change of the guard and everything else that we're seeing and in the world too, right? Oversee everywhere that we're seeing the different challenges. Kind of just puts everybody back into that realm of, okay, let's hone in, let's keep our ear close to the ground and see hopefully the work that we've been doing for the past 18 months, is going to help, reduce the impact, because there's no running away from the tariffs.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how you can try to navigate through with, as little impact or as you can. So I guess that's kind of my experience in the past 5 years.
Nice. Yeah. No, I think that's a really helpful sort of walk down memory lane, so to speak, of like how you guys have been trying to keep up and I think a little bit getting ahead too of some of these things, which can you talk through at a high level of what you source and where you source it from? Where, like, I guess what are the commodities that you care about, and then where are those suppliers and what's the state of those relationships today?
Yeah. So, we're heavily focused on quality. We always work with the highest quality ingredients. We don't work out of freezers. Everything's fresh. So we're really, susceptible to some volatility when it comes to the fresh chicken market or the dairy market. Severe weather and out west, whether it be fires or rain or hurricanes. So, we're constantly on that, always, because there's not much you can really do other than understanding, the environment and trying to, again, look ahead and try to, put in strategies that can help, negate some of that impact and where it's going. If there's other commodities that you can lean into, that can help. You're never going to direct your customer off your number one product, nor would you want to.
Yeah.
But how can you maybe lean into an LTO that can help, with something, or really, to me, and I think a lot of people in the industry who've been doing this, it's a pennies game, and you're constantly looking under every rock. And when these things come around, it's just a part of the challenge to look and make sure, hey, are we doing this, the right way, and validating the things you're currently doing. And, a lot of times you can find something there that can be beneficial.
Yeah. Something that you shared with me, which I thought was interesting as we were preparing for this, was just how short-term some of the contracts are. And so it's like you were in this environment where, I guess chicken is always, like you said, you're susceptible to the fresh market, but there were some things where people were only willing to go month to month instead of 6 months out on certain commodities. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we look at, different seasonalities of things, with the tariffs and whether they were or weren't going to be on, there was a lot of hesitation to recommit, for longer periods of time, not understanding, what kind of demand pressures domestically are going to be placed and what exactly is going to end up flowing through at the end, to our exports and things like that. So, just hesitation in general to go long, I think. And I think it works both ways. I don't think even on our side, we want to stay nimble as well, where we do want to mitigate risk. There's still pressures all over the market. And sometimes it's kind of a win-win with your partners. You look to lean on your partners too, right? If it's something that's not necessarily impacted on that short term of maybe it's a year contract on something you already have, and you really try to hope you can work with your partners in the relationship, and you're not absorbing all of it, right? And they're helping you, and you guys are working together. And hey, here's what we can do for now, and let's visit it again in 6 months, kind of conversations, right?
Yeah. And
but things like tomatoes, right? And our Roma tomatoes that we get from Mexico, we've positioned that to an East Coast Roma now. The seasonality that we're in now is really allowing, some of the peppers and things out in California, out west, coming online. So where we're not immediately seeing some of the impacts and we're positioning ourselves to negate some of it, it's still questionable on what the domestic pressures are going to do to those prices, right? So trying to stay open, keep your ear to the ground, kind of thing, right?
I feel like
fluid.
you're the proverbial duck in the water. You're just like calm on the top, and then your legs are churning underneath constantly. Just trying to figure out where to. And something like the tomato decision specifically, is that how much of that was going to happen anyway versus in response to anything tariff related, or maybe not even tariff related, but let's just say short-term volatility related?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're constantly looking on again mitigating risk and getting the highest quality. And for a long time we were working with great partners through Mexico and their supply of Roma. And what we had found is, through working with other growers and people who could meet, our demands and volumes, that we were able to find growers that could supply us with, just as high quality of product that for our application, right? Most of our Romas are used for a diced application, and we found that we were getting a much better quality cut out of our East Coast Romas. And so it was kind of a dual action win-win, which is really how we try to make all of our decisions, right? Quality first, and then you kind of back in and see what you can do with it, right?
Yeah. On that front, and now this was not in our sort of prep, but something you said was higher quality cut. What does higher quality cut mean? As someone who's totally new to this, let's say, like, specifically, again, you don't have to name the suppliers, obviously, but what does higher quality cut mean between where you were sourcing in Mexico versus shifting to the East Coast supplier? And the reason I want to dig into that is because of what everything Evan said at the top and what you just echoed here, where it's like we start with the non-negotiables and then we work backwards from there. And then you guys are constantly collaborating when it comes to LTOs or when it comes to guest experience or feedback. So, this tomato example is sort of just like an real world application of that happening. So I would love for you to talk through what like quality cut and what that means between the two suppliers.
I'll try not to get too nerdy about it.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You can get nerdy. This is a safe space.
So we use our Roma tomatoes for our diced products and then for our salsa. And the Roma tomato coming out of Mexico, it's got a lot further to travel to Columbus, Ohio, or up to the Midwest, right? And they're very volatile to temperature and things like that as it's traveling. So those tomatoes can become more ripe and more red and different things like that, and can at times produce or have a higher water content, depending on the seasonality of when they're harvesting and things like that. So what we found is with our East Coast product and the supplier, how we were able to kind of mitigate the supply and the logistical travel and a little bit of the volatility in that Roma. So we're getting it at much closer in its ripening stage. So when we're cutting it, there's less water content, there's less gel like in the tomato. So we're able to get a really nice, still flavorful, right in time ripe tomato, that's giving us a higher yield, less water, and better consistency when we're, say, executing our salsa recipe, right?
Yeah. I love that. That's great. I told you, get nerdy. It's good. And then when you think about, digging into that a little bit more, where did the need or the inspiration for changing the sourcing of the Roma tomato come from? Which is a sentence I never thought I'd say in my life. But where was that again? Were you hearing stuff on the marketing and the brand side and the guest side? Was it just like you were talking to, the culinary team and you're like, hey, I think there's something better we can do here? I would love to just understand like the mechanics of where that need came about. And then, of course you went off and tackled it.
Well, I mean, really it's every year, you look at all your products. Tomatoes is one of our top 10 on our list that we buy per year. And you look at it, and again, it's a pennies game. And if you can get, the same quality and you're looking through different suppliers and you find things, right? As we've grown in size and our volumes have given us opportunity to do business with other people. Yeah, it's point. Yeah. It opens different doors that you didn't have before. So it's kind of not necessarily, I guess it's just nature. I think of my business really is constantly looking, when you're doing millions of pounds of something, and 2 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents can really add up, right?
Yes.
And again, I go back to what I was saying, with the tariffs is doing that work up front consistently to try to prep, because there's always going to be these times. Next year we're going to have something else that we could be on this call about, right?
Yeah.
And it's been like that every year, right? And it's like, okay, how can you prep yourselves for impact for the next thing that's going to happen? Yeah. It's gonna happen,
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, I think you're hitting on sort of the heart of why we were excited to have this conversation, which is just like you eventually get to a point where you're like, you can either react to stuff or you can say exactly what you said, where it's like, this is a constant of our business and we just need to build the most resilient supply chain possible. Again, working backwards from those brand principles of quality, value, right? That's why 2 to 3 cents matters when you're doing millions of pounds of stuff, because you have to maintain the value prop for the guest. You have to make sure that the quality is there. And then you have to do it. And this is where I'll turn back to Evan. You have to do it in sort of an innovative way, or deliver it in an innovative way to keep the guests engaged with the brand. I think this is a joint question for both of you, but again, as a newbie to all of this, where do you guys collaborate the best? Is it typically, Evan, are you guys thinking up LTO ideas, menu innovation alongside the founder? Are you thinking those up and then going to Jan and saying, what can we do? Is Jan coming and saying, hey, I'm, shuffling the supply chain in this way, and, if we can use this versus pull back on this? I guess, what's the push and pull in your guys' relationship as you ultimately look to execute on the plate for the guests?
Yeah, I think, before I answer the question, I think there's one thing that Joe Kahn, our founder, says, which is that we are maniacal about quality. Yeah. And Jan is the embodiment of that, of being maniacal and relentless about food quality and about our guest experience, because that is, the core of the guest experience is the quality of the food. And that is what makes the work that Jan does so special, is that we can be maniacal about food quality. And I think ultimately that is a part of the conversation that marketing, innovation, culinary, that we are having together. Sometimes that is a need that we have on our side. We're hearing guests talk about how they want other options when it comes to value that are more centered in price. So then, we're kind of giving that to the innovation team and saying, what does that look like from Condado? To Jan's team, what does that look like when it comes to, to food cost? How can we make this work for what we're hearing from our guests? The same way with, developing a new category like launching burritos. There's that's been a long conversation at Condado for hearing from our guests, the vision of Joe and Trey and what that looks like from Jan's team, and figuring out how do we execute this? How do we build a test that we can understand how to serve our guests the best? So what I love about the collaboration is that there's no one starting point. Sometimes it's one group to another, but ultimately our focus is what is the best for our guests and how can we make that work for our business.
I love that. That's great. That's excellent. And I think that actually tees up nicely for, chapter 3 of this conversation. And I would say the last bit before we get to any audience questions. And again, this is a housekeeping note for those of you who are attending live. There's a little chat button on the bottom right of your screen. If you do have questions, we will take a few minutes to address them at the end. So please feel free to drop them in there. But Evan, turning it back to you, something that you were talking about again was this idea. You said it again, giving value to the guest. And you said at the top where it's like, the beauty of Condado is it can be a choose your own adventure for what your palate wants or what you're in the mood for. Can you talk a little bit about like how you give guests the ability to scale up and down across the menu? How one day I can have a taco or two at a certain price. Another day I can go super indulgent and have maybe a burrito or your new quesadilla with a margarita on the other side. Just talk about how you make that possible. And then what's the challenge in actually marketing that and conveying that to a guest when you can be a little bit more of all things to all people, at least in your specific context?
Yeah, that's a big question and a good question. Yeah. So I think when for a long time at Condado, when we thought about scalability, it was kind of this phrase that was in our training program, which is 1's a snack, 2's a meal, 3's if you're hungry. And we've really evolved beyond that as a brand. And now Guests, when it comes to tacos, I think for a long time there's been, a perception around tacos as a category, not just at our brand. And ultimately, expanding into other categories has really helped us address that perception that guests have around portions and total check. So for some guests, that means using a burrito that's the size of two meals, right? Because they really actually want to take half of this home. The same way with our bowls. For other guests, it is about having, a two taco crunch lunch combo. That they're not going to take home. They want to enjoy it there. The price is going to be spot on, $10.99 for lunch, easy in and out service. For others, it's going to be doing bundles for the family and ordering bowls and doing those large online orders where everyone, as they're ordering on the app, can really scale. And what that means is, do they want a bundle? Do they want tacos? Are they thinking about bowls or burritos where they can fold it up and reheat it later? So again, it's both a category, an innovation in categories and an innovation in the product and what we're offering in terms of BYO, right? What can we do to enhance our BYO offering?
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like, I think the way you framed it when in our prep call was like the problem with tacos and how the problem with tacos, for lack of a better term. Oh, well, I think there's a couple things too. It's like someone sees taco, they automatically compare it to every other taco they've had. And so they don't necessarily think that, oh, the Condado taco portion size is larger. So like one taco at Condado is equal to 1.5 or 2 tacos somewhere else. And so I think it's like you're battling that perception, and that pushes this need to say we should have a burrito. And we're going to do the burrito big the same way we do the tacos big, or we should do a bowl, right? And so I think I really understand sort of the brand and the principles, but as well as I think you guys do a good job of addressing sort of the perception risk that comes with that. When you think about the supply chain issues that Jan has been talking about and sort of the volatility, again, it's been nothing new here over the last few years. How has that impacted other instances of menu innovation or menu engineering? So I think about like the Crunch Lunch Bundle. I think about the Swole Bowl. I think about some of the stuff that you're doing on the margarita side. Maybe give us a couple examples of how some of the supply chain challenges influence how you guys execute on LTOs, and then also how you position those LTOs to the consumer to keep the engagement with the brand higher.
Yeah, I think innovation is so important. Not being stagnant, listening to our guests. We have to be supply chain smart, but ultimately our guests come first. So I think it's having that dialogue with them. We invite our best buds to have tasting events, and we're constantly sending out surveys to guests. We really want to be as close to them as possible so that we can understand their challenges, what they're looking for from us, so that we're not stagnant. We are constantly innovating. And so just like what you said, when it came to the Crunch Lunch combo, or, rolling out two tacos, a side and a drink, a true value for dine-in, that kind of, we have that offering online. Those guests are so used to that. So rolling that out for dine-in so that they feel that they have that experience in the restaurant. Same thing when it comes to beverage. Our beverage strategy adapts to, whether that is adding premium margarita upgrades. So guests who maybe they don't want a house marg anymore, they actually want to elevate. Many restaurants have over 100 tequila options, so that you're actually able to find a new tequila that you've seen at the, maybe you've seen it at the liquor store and you're like, oh, I've always wanted to try that. Condado is a great place to kind of mix and match, try new tequilas in your marg, see what you really like. The same thing with our LTOs for margs too. We're constantly innovating and balancing that with the cost of tequila, so that guests can really feel like they have a great value for beverage too. That's often, I think, overlooked in the LTO conversation. It's so much around entree, but beverage is so foundational to our brand, and we want to make sure that we're also meeting guests where they are today on the beverage side.
Yeah, and then on the beverage innovation side, is the innovation on the types of tequila? So like the 100 different tequilas that you're talking about in certain locations, or is it more on the what can you do with that tequila, like on the flavor profile side? Maybe talk us through the premium beverage program and where the innovation is happening.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's transforming our beverage program to have the scalability of our BYO, of our taco suggestions, of our
Oh,
entree
interesting.
menu. And that's really
Yeah.
where, yeah, I think that's really, where we're so fantastic at beverage is you can have a great house marg. You can make it a large marge, if, typo intended. If you do want a slightly larger format marg, but still want to be in that house marg price range, you could also go for a pitcher for the whole table, which is always a great deal. At the same time, I think, again, for those guests who want to scale up, right? They want to try a handsome devil. They want to try something unique, interesting with premium tequila. We have that too. I think that's really where, when we talk about the values of Condado, it is the customization, both in food and in beverage, that we are always trying to optimize.
Yeah. Amazing. And then I think I would be remiss not to ask you, as we sort of get to the end of our structured format here, we're remiss not to ask you how data plays a part in all this. Obviously,
Yeah.
like, you've been partnering with us for the last several months now. And it seems like there is a lot of innovation happening across the board. And the flexibility of the menu, as you mentioned, is, I would say, the two superpowers that I've learned about Condado, having met Jan and then spoken with you and Sarah, your CMO, extensively, is the flexibility of the menu. And then, of course, the quiet force behind making it possible, which is Jan lurking in the background, trying to figure out how to switch tomato suppliers or bowl suppliers from China
Yes.
to India or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So can you talk about, our work together and the role that you feel like having data on all of these different initiatives has had on menu innovation, menu engagement, etc.?
Yeah, I think that the power, and certainly for the marketing side, it's not a guessing game. I think that's what's so fantastic with Bicky is that, we can reach our guests with surveys, but there's always this missing component. And when we onboarded Bicky, it really unlocked another way for us to listen to our guests by looking at their actions, right? Because the proof is right there. So using real guest behavior, and layering that on with how we're thinking about menu, how we're making decisions, using real Bicky data, pulling up the PMIX report or the item detail report, and being able to go item by item and understand, hey, maybe this is actually this is an item that actually we need to start promoting, right? Because it has great reorder, great retention, but the UX on our website could be more user friendly, right? We unlocked those kind of insights using Bicky, and the powerful menu reporting that Bicky offers us. And one great recent case study that we celebrated together was the chicken bacon ranch burrito, which Bicky was a huge part in that becoming an LTO. We discovered that the chicken bacon ranch taco, huge reorder rate, amazing retention, new guests, repeat guests. It is a crowd favorite. So when we were looking at what would be the first brand wide LTO burrito, it made a lot of sense that we would lean into a taco build that guests love and that they reorder. And that's perfect for spring. It's refreshing. It's a lettuce-based burrito. It's light, yet it's filling. It's a fantastic product. And Bicky was so instrumental in us actually making that decision. And now we are using a new feature in Bicky, the new menu impact report. And we're really able to see that it had, that new guests, repeat guests, they have a higher average order value because when they're ordering this product compared to others. So we see the success both as we're innovating and ideating and post-launch and being able to understand the true ROI of an LTO and its impact.
Amazing.
So we're very pro Bicky. We love it.
We appreciate that. Thank you. No, I mean, it warms my heart to hear that we're helping you understand the success of these bets better. I was going to say that, just to shine a light a little bit more on the chicken bacon ranch burrito, you mentioned a little bit with average check. Any other early stats or proof points that you'd like to share on the success of it? I think when we were together a few weeks ago, you were telling me about, it was National Burrito Day, and I'm not sure if the chicken bacon ranch burrito specifically played a part in that, but any early stats around your burrito LTO program generally that you feel like it's worth sharing? I just want to shine a light on some of the great work that y'all are doing.
Yeah, well, National Burrito Day was insane. And, shout out to our amazing operators, to Jan and his team for executing at such a high level. It was just an incredible promotion, from the support center to our culinary teams, to our ops, everybody working together. And Chicken Bacon Ranch, huge that day. People trying it for the first time. And what we're seeing just in the new menu impact report is it's lifting frequency with new guests. Those that tried it are reordering it, and they're returning at a slightly higher rate, which is fantastic. Sort of early proof. I think in a month we'll kind of have that big 90-day view of the item, but so far, just really strong performance, and really shows how you can take data. I think this is where, when people are thinking about CDPs, it can be overwhelming, right? Unless you go in and we had a goal and we have focus. I think that's the most important thing. Is when you go into Bicky is having that objective of, I really want to understand, what are the flavor profiles that our guests are reordering and returning to, and then using that data to then go back to the teams and collaborate and make those decisions. And I think that's where we have an amazing team where we're all very focused on delivering exceptional food for our guests and exceptional experience. And data is that kind of proof point to help us make smarter decisions for them.
Love it. Well, amazing. I mean, this has been a great conversation for me personally. I've learned so much from both of you just in the last 40 minutes that we've been spending here together. I don't see any questions here in the chat, and so let's leave it at that. Thank you both so much again for your time. Very grateful for it, of course. For those of you who I spoke too soon. We just got a couple questions, so we're live. Okay, here we go. This is from somebody in the audience. Was the addition of the burrito menu category a result of data compiled from Bicky, or a supply chain / chef-driven decision, or both?
Well, I could take that. So we started burritos before we launched with Bicky. But Bicky really empowered our decisions around burritos and what would stay on the menu when we launched brand wide. We were in the middle of a test when we onboarded Bicky. There's always a joke at Condado that there would be no burritos. And what we heard from our guests is that they actually really wanted Condado burritos. They wanted us to get into the burrito space and the burrito game. And so that was something that Chef Trey and Joe Connor, founder, and Jan and the entire team really worked on. What does that look like? How do we execute at scale? And that was a year-long test to vet out a few different menu concepts. And ultimately, we really were able to scale that up as a category and deliver something that is unique. It's not just your normal burrito. Our burrito suggestions are big. They're filling. They have a queso pocket. They are really truly that unusual Condado experience. So it was really driven by listening to our guests.
Love it. That's great. Jan, anything you wanted to add there?
No, he nailed it there, right? It was how do you, get into the burrito game? It's already been, the market's been defined, and how do you get into it and keep that, your name and values attached to that menu item as well, right? Why is it, a value? Why is it special? What makes it a Condado burrito? And then how do we execute it, right? Well and consistently. So, some people might think it's a little easier than it is to roll out a burrito, pun intended. But, there's definitely a lot of conversations involved.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. And final question here. For third-party delivery transactions, where there's no direct interaction with the guest familiar with Condado, how does Condado engage with these guests, convey its service and hospitality, and provide a snapshot of the brand to encourage repeat business? Great question.
That is a great question. I think there's a few different avenues there. First of all, it's, I think, having a great partnership with the DSPs and building those relationships so that we can actually better understand the guests who really choose to be third-party guests, which is great. We have a great partnership with DoorDash and with Uber Eats, and ultimately, I think a few things. One, if I talk about conveying our service and our hospitality, there's a few ways that we can do that. One is with packaging, making sure that, and order accuracy, making sure that we have high standards for packaging, for order accuracy, that we're really delivering what would be a great dine-in experience to the guests when they order from DoorDash or when they order from first party. I think the other thing is using strategic POP, whether that's bag stuffers, bag seals, to encourage them to become a first party guest, and giving them the opportunity of whether that is rewards exclusive menu items, whether that is really a significant, we have very generous rewards program that you would not get through a third party delivery channel. So different avenues there, and providing a snapshot, I'm reading of the brand to encourage repeat business. I think that comes down to the partnership with third party providers. There's always going to be a percentage of guests who choose to order through third party. And for those guests, it really is working with the delivery providers to have strategic offers in place to understand the advertising portion of third party and really vetting out the ROI there, so that we are spending smart. And we are encouraging repeat business for the guests who really are not going to leave DoorDash because they have Dash Pass and the like.
Yeah, I love it. Questions keep rolling in. So I promise we will take, this is the final one that we'll take here because I know we're coming up on time. When the burrito was rolled out, was it based on guest feedback? And what tools did you use to listen to your guests and understand their preferences? And then was Bicky involved in this process was the final question. But let's in the interest of time, we can cut out the was Bicky involved part and just in general, if we're in there, that's great. If we're in the answer, it's great. If we're not, what tools did you use to listen to your guests and understand their preferences? And how did you get guest feedback on the burrito when it was rolled out?
Yeah, a few different, definitely across omni-channel strategy to get guest feedback and to understand that feedback beforehand. That was had a lot to do with surveying rewards guests who are much more frequent. They have a much higher lifetime value to us, to understand what would they want to see on our menu as we continue to optimize. And burritos were resounding, huge headline from those guests that they wanted us to enter that space. So we're using a variety of CX surveys from both the post-order, post-transaction notifications, whether that's email, SMS, push, getting them to fill out surveys, letting us know how their burrito experience was. But also we used physical paper surveys in the restaurants too for guests who didn't want to scan, collecting that feedback in every way that we could. We also hosted, I think, 3 or 4 in-person tastings for burritos to ask guests what they thought, how are they doing, both before launch and after. And so that's where when we wanted to know if BYO was essential, we knew it was. We wanted to vet that out. They said, yes, we've been waiting for BYO burritos for 4 months, 5 months during the test. And so we rolled out BYO burritos and figured out how to do that at scale. So I think it's, it's not just one channel that's going to get us closer to our guests. I think it's several channels, and any opportunity to be in the same room with your guests. I think that is, that's some of the greatest experiences that we can have as a brand.
Yeah, I think this goes back to, I've been thinking a lot about there's been a lot of hand wringing lately around the future of casual dining, and where casual dining is going to go, and is it still relevant in an era where third party delivery is growing and orders are shifting off premise with drive-through. And I think your answer just now on how you tested scaled burritos is the perfect encapsulation of how to use the casual dining model as a superpower for your brand. I think just like exactly what you said of being in the same room as the guest, having someone touch a table and talk to a guest instead of who doesn't want to scan, and actually doing the paper survey and building the processes to get that feedback up to the marketing team, to the culinary team, to the supply chain side. I think all of those things are just things that you can do in a casual dining environment, or easier to do in a casual dining environment that you can't do in a quick server or fast casual environment. So I think we'll end it there. I think you guys, this has been, again, from my perspective, this has been a great encapsulation of your brand's unique strengths and superpowers, the people behind those, the people that are executing on this day in, day out. And so I just want to say very grateful for your time once again. And if you are ever in Columbus or Pittsburgh, get to Condado Tacos, get a taco, get a burrito, get a margarita. It's worth it. Trust me. Thank you so much. Evan, Jan, thanks again.
Thank you, Abhinav.
Be well.
Thank you.